Start. Dear students, today uh, I would like to start your poem, A Passerby, Robert Bridges. As students of science, you must be having interest in your basic science, but at the same time, it is equally important for all of you to pay attention and take language equally serious because in our life we transact, we communicate, we speak, we interact, we trade, we communicate through language. Obviously, language becomes a most important component. Therefore, what I want to make you people understand is that the most important component of learning is also the acquisition of good language. And not only acquisition of good language, but also you must be able to communicate with competence. Hence, this component is taken care of at your undergraduate level by prescribing some literature, some pieces of literature, literary components, whether it is prose or poetry. Again, in prose, it may be the short story or essays, or sometimes short fictions, dramas, biographies. Any component can be included. Hence, today I would like to draw your attention to the poetry section. Remember, poetry is a finest form of human creation in literary realm. It is only human beings who are capable of creating literature. Don't be under the impression that the other animals on this planet can create literature. The language which has reached the zenith of its perfection, the creative power of human beings bloomed into different artistic expressions like the literature, fine art, dance, music, sculpture. It may be in any form for that matter. So, what a poet does in a poem is exactly equal to what an artist does with his brush and different colors. Hence, here Mr. Robert Bridges comes out with a beautiful poem. Before that, let me say one or two sentences about Mr. Robert Bridges. I remember, though he was born in Eton in 1844 and went to Christ College, later Oxford. But remember, he practiced medicine for some time. But though he practiced medicine, his heart rested in literary field. Therefore, he shifted from medicine to literature and became a full-time literary writer. Perhaps the Testament of Beauty, which has seen several reprints during given his lifetime, is the masterpiece of Mr. Robert Bridges. And he was also a poet laureate of England. Remember, very few people have the privilege to be recognized or honored this great honor that is the poet laureate. He was also a poet, critic, and a genius, a man of very, very keen observation of life and events of life. Uh, Remember, here is a poem. The title of the poem is A Passerby. Remember, passerby sounds to be very, very casual in its tone and tenor. The very title may not take you to seriousness because, after all, what is a passerby? Anyone who can pass by, you people can be a passerby. But here, what the poet is trying to present before us is he is going to speak about a ship. Remember, England, an island, has been able to create a lot of literature surrounding the sea, the ship, the adventurous life. There's a lot of literature created by British concerning to these aspects of life because it is because of this reason England is considered as the queen of waters. Its name is very powerful even today during world wars also. Therefore, the poet must have fallen in love with a ship which goes without being noticed by ordinary eyes of ours. How many of us really have fallen in love with the bicycles and have written or composed poetry? Or how many of us have uh, really written great literature about a farmer's cart, for example? It goes unnoticed, isn't it? What I want to tell you, the very selection of the topic by this poet has a special communication in the sense there is a scanty literature available on the same, but here is a poet who gives a fresh flesh and blood to what he observed in the seashore of England. Who knows? A passerby is a direct reference to the ship. You all know what a ship is, how it is made up of, what is its structure, and how majestic it is if you look at it when it is really going. Therefore, what I would like to bring to your notice is that the glory, the majesty, the beauty, the elegance, the extraordinary looks that a ship has got, and its extraordinary expedition, its majestic journey in the sea, in the ocean, has been very beautifully depicted in this poem by Mr. Robert Bridges, a celebrated poet. Remember, there is a great difference between looking at things from an ordinary man's eyes to a poet's eyes. A poet has eyes which can penetrate deeply into the subject matter. That's exactly what happens in this case also. The poet, Mr. Robert Bridges, who carefully, meticulously, with a lot of curiosity, with a lot of, should I say, love for the sake, looks at this poem, looks at this ship, and comes out with a brilliant poem. The brilliance of the theme, the brilliance of the expression, the brilliance of the composition, the brilliance of the proper use of the words to communicate his point of view on the ship is well brought out, I would say. He rather addresses this ship. He speaks to it, giving it a life. He personifies rather, and he describes it. Look at the description of the poem. Let me read out once so that you get a taste of that poem. Feather, remember, imagine you are standing on a seashore. There is a ship anchored on the seashore, and you are a poet. You are interested to compose a poem. Obviously, you look at it with a lot of curiosity and address the ship. Look at the poet's address of this ship. Feather, oh splendid ship, thy white sails crowding, leaning across the bosom of the urgent west, that fairest nor sea rising, nor sky clouding, whither away, fair rover, and what thy quest? And what thy quest? Ah, soon, when winter has all our vales oppressed, when skies are cold and misty, and hail is hurling, wilt thou glide on the blue Pacific, or rest in a summer heaven asleep, thy white sails furling? This is the first stanza of the poem. The second stanza goes like this. I there before thee, I there before thee, in the country that well thou knowest, already arrived am inhaling the odorous air. Inhaling the odorous air. I watch thee enter unerringly where thou goest, and anchor queen of the strange shipping there. Thy sails for awnings spread, thy masts bare, nor is aught from the foaming reef to the snow-capped grandest peak that is over the feathery feathery palms more fair than thou, so upright, so stately, and still thou standest. That brings us to the end of the second stanza. In the final stanza, that is the third stanza, the poet comes out. And yet, oh splendid ship. See, there is a recurrence of this statement. Oh splendid ship. The poem begins with this awe, inspiration, unhailed and nameless. I know not if aiming a fancy, I rightly divine that thou hast a purpose joyful, a courage blameless, thy port assured in a happier land than mine. For all I have given thee, beauty enough is thine, as though assailant with trim tackle and shrouding from the proud nostril curve of prow's line, in the offing scatterest foam, thy white sails crowding. That brings us to the reading of this beautiful poem by Mr. Robrt, titled A Passerby. Remember, the poem begins with a glorious tribute to the ship. The poet is magnanimous. The poet is really luxurious as far as praising of this ship is concerned. Whither? Oh, he speaks. Where are you going? Which way you are traveling? Which is your destination? He asks. Oh, splendid ship. See, if you stand before a huge, a mammoth ship, you really feel very tiny before it, and you express your honest, you are charmed by its majestic looks, its splendor, its grandeur. Therefore, the poet says that, oh, splendid ship, nothing less than this. Studios. Thy white sails crowding when you move, when you roar, when you go ahead, white sails crowding. The moment you start your journey, if we look back behind this ship, we can see the white foam being formed, rows of water, and the crowding of the white sails. White sails crowding, leading across the bosom of the urgent west. See, when I look at you, what are you doing? You are traveling towards the western part of England, let's say, leaning across the bosom of the urgent west. You seem to be traveling towards the western part from where the poet is standing and observing this ship, leaning across the bosom part of yours is leaning. Maybe you are more interested to travel towards the western part. You have more fascination, it seems, to travel towards western part. The poet imagines. Of course, the ship is moving, traveling gradually. But the response of the poet is so rich, so beautiful, so imaginative that he holds a conversation with it, silent conversation with it. And in the third line, what he does, he rather describes its adventurous nature, its courage, its confidence, its boldness. How? Look at this line. That fairest nor sea rising. See, when it is moving, it is not scared of anything, it is not afraid of anything, irrespective of the waves which are coming, torrential rains, or irrespective of the mountainous side waves are not dampening the spirit of this ship. It's going ahead. It is not caring for any sea rising. Hmm? It is not at all afraid of anything. Not sky clouding. See, there are huge clouds formed. Who knows, at any moment the torrential rains might come, but the ship is not at all worried. The ship is not at all dampened in its spirit because it is doing its duty. Compare the same with life, how you would feel. Consider yourself as the ship. The vast sea of this ship is your life. You are the ship. The vast sea is the life. And the turbulent waters, rains, torrential rains, clouding, and all the thundering, lightning could be the difficulties of life that you face. Imagine, it is not simply the ship that the writer is trying to present before us. It is something more than that ship is talking to us. See, whither away? See, you are traveling without caring for all these turbulences taking place around you. You are so fearless, unaware of the happenings around you, that you have a single mission of reaching your destination. That is the most requisite point that the poet is hinting at, that how human beings too can lead their life. Set your goal, pursue it, care not for all the difficulties that you come across in your life. The single-minded devotion, the single-handed devotion alone can take you to the, 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 the should I say, the destination, or where your destiny lies. Whither away, fair rover? See, he addresses it, a fair rover. It is so pure. It is so blemishless. See, therefore he addresses that as if there is a life and a fair rover. And what thy quest? I am not able to understand. What is your quest? What is your aim? What are your objectives? Where are you going? What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? What's your quest? Who knows what the quest, what the desire, what the ambition of this ship could be? The quest may be to reach the other part of the sea with all these difficulties that it is facing right now, unmindful of all the crises it is confronting, all the difficulties it is passing through, and all the challenges that it is able to eventually meet on its journey. Compare it, as I told you before, to life. The meaning would be very, very clear. So, the poet says, I'm not able to understand what your quest is. He is trying to enumerate this poem through such questions. The next time, soon. What happens? The moment winter comes, the journey cannot be that smooth. Of course, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? That's another thing. Even the commencement of winter may not dampen your spirit. He says, look at this. Soon, when winter has all our vales oppressed, when I see the commencement of winter season has a direct bearing on all the valleys, all the lakes. Who knows? They might go to a freezing point. They may be dampened in their spirit. They may be oppressed. The spirit may come down, oppressed. And even when skies are cold and misty and hail is hurling, see, the poet is trying to describe the winter season here in a very short two lines, stating that the skies are cold and also misty because of the winter season. It's be falling, and along with that, sometimes who knows, there can be a hail is hurling, maybe hailstones may be falling down. It also suggests that there is an adverse time that you are made to pass through. Therefore, even in this adverse, after all, winter could be compared to the life in terms of its difficulties that the human beings really face. Therefore, uh, he asks in the next line, wilt thou glide on the blue Pacific? Are you planning to travel towards the Pacific Ocean, which is blue in its color? Or rest in a summer heaven asleep? Or you want to take rest You want to sleep in a summer heaven. Thy fight sails furling. See, the poet looks at it, you can see the white furling behind the formation of foam, the formation of a kind of water getting aside. When the ship moves, the oceanic or sea water makes two rows, giving the ship its own passage to go ahead. These are all the natural phenomena happening right in front of the poet's eye are being described. So the poem is quite picturesque. The moment we start reading the poem, we get to the feeling as if the poet is giving us a beautiful fine art piece with beautiful color combination, an exquisite description of the fertile imagination of the poet is candidly expressed in itself. Okay. Now, in the second stanza, what happens? The poet rather deviates. He is in his imaginary work. He fancies that he is not here. He must have gone and advanced. He must have reached the place where the ship is likely to reach. He must have reached there in advance. How? I there before thee. Very simple words, very effectively expressed. I there. I've already reached where you wanted to go. Before you reach the spot where you wanted to reach, I have already gone there. And how is that place? How is that country? How is that land? How is that topography of that land where you are going to live the next few days? See, when I visited, the poet says, in that country, in that place, in that region, that well thou knowest, as you are already familiar with it, because you must have frequently visited it in your lifetime. Because remember, a sheep does not simply visit one place in its lifetime only once. Who knows, it must have reached that spot, that place, that country spot several times, taking passengers. What he says, I have already arrived. I'm inhaling the odorous air. So I have come to this spot where you used to visit frequently, and I am able to breathe in the lovely aroma of that land. That's why it seems that you are visiting this land very frequently, my dear Sid. I'm visiting the same spot, the same place where you wanted to. See here what he says. I therefore, see, going there before you go. And I have been able to relish the lovely atmosphere of that land. It is so fantastic. It's so nice to be there. It is so charming. See, it is so charming. I there before thee, in the country that well thou knowest, already arrived and inhaling the odorous air. So, before you arrived there, I have already gone and am enchanted by this land. I am able to inhale the odorous smell. I watched thee enter unerringly where thou goest. Ah, when I recall your journey, when I recall your journey, I feel you are so flawless in your journey. You never make mistakes. You never commit any flaws. You are always unerring. You never make mistakes. So perfect you are. I watch thee. I look at you. I observe you. When you enter unerringly where thou goest, wherever you go, whatever part of the world you reach, you are so unerring that there is no scope at all. There is a beauty of your journey and your time. And anchor queen of the strange shipping there. Obviously, whether it's a boat or a launch or a ship, whether it is a military one or civilians one or a mercantile one, they're all anchored at a little distance away from the seashore because they need not the shallow water but deep water because of the heavy weight they carry. They are anchored in the further part of the within the sea. Therefore, what happens here? And anchor queen of the strange shipping there, thy sails for awning spread. Now the poet is trying to describe how the ship look like once it is anchored there. How does it look like? Once it is stationed, once it reaches the seashore, what happens there? Thy sails, that means your movement, your sailing, your journey for awnings spread, a kind of canvas a ship has at the upper part. It is spread. The physical description of this ship takes place here. And the thy sails for awnings spread. Obviously, when the ship is moving, because of the robust wind flow, the canvas, the cloth that is spread over the ship, it is spread. Thy masts there. What happens? You see that there are some tall spar of sailing vessels, spikes, which have become rather bare without having any canvas over them. Who knows? Because of the spreading of the canvas, the masts are naked, bare, without having any clothing. The kind of the spikes that are there. Nor is aught from the foaming reef to the snow-capped grandest. Ah, even the foaming reef, coral reefs, foaming reefs, quite common, familiar phrases being used in a context of an ocean. To the snow-capped grandest, when you look at the beautiful mountainous tops, caps, snow-cladded, and the lovely reefs where there is full of foam, from the foaming reef to the snow-capped grandest peak, that is over the feathery palms. Palm trees are standing tall, are almost looking like, see, when a palm tree stands shedding its leaves, who knows, it must be almost resembling a shape, having lost its awnings spread and masts bare. The poet looks at it and he is suddenly reminded of the ship's condition the moment he visits that land where he sees the palm trees. So there is a remote association the poet is trying to associate the palm trees as well as this ship as far as its structural aspects are concerned. More fair than thou so upright. You are fair, no doubt. When I compare thee with that, you are so upright. You stand so well, even in adverse circumstances. So stately. See, stately means something that has got the regal looks, grandeur, like an emperor with an imposing looks, majestic expressions, and still thou standest. So you stand out in such a scenario. You look different, distinct. You're something more than what you really are. But nobody has sung such a majesty of yours in terms of words. Therefore, the poet may be saying, that's why I'm here. I'm composing this poem in praise of you. I'm here to pen down your glorious looks, your glorious journey, your glorious spirit, your glorious achievements. That brings us to the end of the second stanza. When we come to the third stanza, and the poet makes a conclusion in this poem and says, and yet, uh, again, you see, he pays supreme compliments to the ship. And yet, oh splendid ship, I have made a reference to this. There is a reference and a refrain. The same phraseology was used in the first line of this poem. Again, in the last stanza of the first line, the poet is repeating the same phraseology. Oh, splendid ship. The poet is not willing to take any other phrase to describe the beauty of this ship except its expression as splendid, gorgeous, beautiful, regal, majestic, impressive, fascinating, whatnot. No word can substitute the amount of adoration the poet has got for this ship. His profound devotedness to this ship in terms of its description, both the internal beauty, external beauty, its actions, and its structure. The container and the content both are beautifully expressed here. How splendid is it? Unhailed and nameless. No history has noticed your majesty. No history has recorded your splendor. Nobody has described you in the history. You have come, you have done, and you are forgotten. You have become nameless. No, I don't want to make you a nameless one. I want to bring back the life that you deserve, the fame that you deserve, the glory that you deserve through my poem, through my words, through my song. Therefore, what the poet says, see, oh splendid shape, unhailed and nameless, you seem to be never cared of. You are never written. You are never described. Therefore, I want to pay supreme compliments to you today. That's my objective. I know not if aiming a fancy, of course, I don't know whether I am doing a right thing or not. It is not my concern what I am going to do in case if it is a fancy. You may consider this as a fancy. It's a figment of imagination. But what I feel, this is my genuine feeling, let me express it, the poet says. I know not if, aiming a fancy, I rightly divine that thou hast a purpose joyful. One thing is pretty sure, my dear shape, you have a divine joy. You have a, a joyful purpose. Whatever you do, whatever weight is, whatever goods, whatever number of passengers you carry, you do your job with a joy, with a purpose. It is not a humdrum activity. You don't make any fuss about your activity. Therefore, nobody has sung in beauty of yours. Therefore, what I would say in this poem of mine, that I want to sing the glory of yours. So you have a purpose, you have a joyous journey you have taken place. And what about the next line? A courage blameless. I made a reference to the kind of courage, the kind of confidence, the kind of valor, the kind of bravery that this ship does cannot be expressed in terms of words. Therefore, the poet says, a courage blameless. Your courage is blameless. It is supreme, flawless, no errors. That is the quality of its courage. It is not a coward's courage. It is not an artificial courage. It's a blameless courage. A courage that has come, rather has welled out, rather has sprung up from its deep commitment to its duty, to the call, to the cause. Thy port assured in a happier land than mine. Now, thy port assured in a happier land than mine. I feel that your port, where you are going to be harbored, where you are going to be caned, where you are going to be anchored, where you are going to be stationed, seems to be happier, joyous than my own port. As a human beings, I have my own miseries. I have my own difficulties. They're all self-invited. They're all self-created. But on the contrary, you have reached a happy island, a happy seashore, a happy anchoring spot where you are going to be very, very happy. Nothing but happiness prevails in you. Happier land than mine. Your land is happier. My land is full of miseries. Therefore, the poet is admitting the agony of the humanity in a veiled way. He's not directly telling. He's just he's just making comparative analysis between the difficulties that the ship faces and the human beings face in their lifetime. But for all I have given thee, beauty, enough is thine. My dear ship, whatever glory that I have sung so far, whatever phrases that I used to describe you, whatever I have done, don't be under the impression that I am making a flat phrasing. You deserve it because you are so beautiful. You are so majestic. Beauty is thine. It is your beauty that has compelled me to compose this beautiful poem and sing in praise of you. Therefore, how do you think that my tributes to you through words are not justified? No, these are my supreme compliments. By writing a poem, the poet says that he wants to pay compliments to the ship. Don't be under the impression that I am simply flattering you. Yours is a beautiful look that has compelled me to write about. Beauty enough is thine. So you have got beautiful looks as though aslant with trim tackle and shrouding. See the front portion of this ship. How does it look like in a triangle shape? As though aslant. It forms a sloping curvature. The front part of the shape has got sloping look or an angle formed there like this, some angle. The front portion of the liner or the ship is compared to a curved nostril. See, nostril of ours. From the proud nostril curve of a prose line, from you are so majestic, so beautiful, so cute, so charming, so fascinating, so majestic. Look at it. From the proud nostril curve of a prose line, from your nostril curve. The poet compares the curve, the front portion, the forwardmost portion of the ship as if it's a curved nostril of the ship. In the offing's cataraced foam is giving us the foam that is scattered behind the ship. Front portion is like that, the back portion is like this. Thy fight sails crowding. Ah, the first line of the poem, this phrase was used, fight sails crowding. The last phrase, thy fight sails crowding, is again repeated. The first line of the poem, the second part of the first line is recurring here. Thy white sails crowding. When your majestic, beautiful, nostril shaped front portion of the ship is moving ahead, how does it look behind? Thy white sails crowding. There is huge crowding of what? The white foaming when the ship is set to sail. This is how the poet, in the last line of the poem, rather expresses the structural appeal of the ship. And remember, he was a dramatist and a poet and also a critic. Remember, when a poem is written by a critic, it differs from when a poem is written by only a poet. But here is a poet critic. A poet critic is someone who is very meticulous in his observation and very, very calculative in terms of the use of the words and their selection and their arrangements in order to infuse beauty into it. That exactly is being done by Mr. Robert Bridges in this poem, and he has rather done a kind of a, should I say, justice to it. Indeed, no doubt, it's a beautiful poem, and it definitely creates colors in the minds of the readers of this poem. So beautiful it is. Of course, the poet is trying to describe here a casual and ordinary sight which he is familiar with of a ship on the sea, but he gives it an immortal touch, immortal description. And the description, of course, sounds to be very realistic to us. The description of this poem, by carefully choosing the words that are so appropriate to the occasion, it definitely fires our imagination. And at the same time, you can see how the poet is so minutely able to observe and how familiar is the poet with the ship, its different parts, its journey, and all other things. So obviously what we are trying to make in this context is the poet in this poem is trying to paint his own experience of looking at a ship, which he is of course familiar with, and brings out a brilliant poem. And I don't think whether you have any complaints against the poet. After all, you too can come out with brilliant poems on such themes. But the moment it comes back to the shore, when its sail stops, it becomes bare. See, of course, as life comes to an end, we also become very bare. Only our skeletons will remain. Similarly, when the ship is anchored, it might look bare. and it might remind you the extraordinary stint, extraordinary journey that it had before it was anchored, before it became bare, before it was stripped off its canvas from the top part. There's a glorious message the poet is trying to give in this poem. And the poet rather brings out the majesty of the ship, nothing more than the, the sheer majestical stature of this ship. This is what I planned for the day, and I have tried to give you in a nutshell how Mr. Robert Bridges tries to present his theme from his own experience, and you can fairly well accept this poem since it is purely a personal impression of the poet. Though it is a personal impression, yet it is a realistic one. There are no parts of the poem which can be debated or disputed. As creativity knows no bounds, so also criticism can come out with brilliant critical thinking and analysis. And that brings us to the end of this descriptive part of the poem. And you can go through the poem. If you got any queries, if you got any doubts, if you got any difficulties, you are most welcome to ask your queries. You can address all your queries. You can send them on my WhatsApp. If you got any doubts, I would be very happy to respond to your queries if there are any. Once I start next poem, I think that brings us to the end of this poem. As I have already just now told you that what you should do, go through the poem once or twice. Imagine that you are standing on a seashore, witnessing a live ship. How does it look? How it is decorated? How does its upper part look like? How does the front part of it look like? How does the 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 other part of behind the ship look like? And how glorious it was when it was live, moving? And how does it look like once it was stationed at its old age? Who knows? And we're all going to be stationed as we grow old in a place. This motional form of man comes to a stationary form, like a ship. The ship, which was full of uprightness, majesty, boldness, unmindful of all the adverse circumstances, was able to move ahead. Now is quietly stationed. So also human beings, once their lifespan is over, once their strength is exhausted, once their spirit comes to a deadening stage, then automatically things stop. Okay, with this, now let us wind up this poem and say goodbye to you. Pradeep, Pradeep, very big. Any queries from your side? If you got any queries, as I told you just now, either you can send them on your WhatsApp or even a Telegram group is formed of your class. You can send your queries to the Telegram and forget not to inform me these aspects. That's very, very essential. You know, but not stop.